Hey guys, Arleesha here and welcome to another video. So, pretty much the same as usual this time. I've got 3 more Inktober pieces to show you. Pretty happy with all of these, and I think this first one may actually be my favorite. Before we get started talking about it, I just wanted to say thank you as always for all of your support and your encouragement during this month. It's been a lot of fun working out new techniques with these ink drawings, ink painting, illustrations, and it's just been really fun to explore these types of themes and subject matter, and it's just been very enjoyable, so thank you guys so much for following along. You may notice that I did something a bit different for this painting. Usually what I do is in the beginning I show you my original sketch next to the transferred lines of the piece that I will then be painting over. And I did the same thing with this one, but instead of transferring my lines like using my Prismacolor Verithin pencil like I usually do for those lines, this time I actually just used a light ink wash for the lines, so the lines are in ink and they're not in pencil. I was really inspired by a couple other artists that I had seen working in this manner, and they do the same thing with watercolors actually, so they'll transfer their final lines over in watercolor and then just paint over top of them, and I just thought that idea was really interesting and wanted to give it a try, and I actually really liked how that turned out then, how those very subtle ink lines just really truly did blend into the piece when it was all done, and by the time I got to the end of this piece I really couldn't tell that I had transferred any lines at all. It was just one solid ink illustration, which was really fun. The other thing that I really enjoyed about this particular piece was working with the negative space, so adding the black in the upper half of the piece in between these sort of white tendrils, and I just thought that was really fun playing with adding in negative space or sort of carving out the white areas, and that was really enjoyable. I basically just fell back on most of my favorite techniques with this piece in using a couple different ink washes, starting with sort of a wet on dry approach where my paper was pretty much dry and I was just adding solid layers to that background. And then I went in and wet the sort of face subject area and dropped in some really loose ink washes and added some salt and then added depth as I went along. And this piece was just kind of a good example of, I don't know, the overall atmosphere of Inktober for me as a whole, so that was really fun. I did want to talk to you guys a little bit about the idea of just burning out during this month and kind of weighing your options as we get towards the middle of the month now as to, people are kind of starting to evaluate what they've created so far and how kind of counting the costs, I guess, as far as the stress or the time involved, and people are deciding at this point whether or not they want to continue and push through the entire month. I mean, some people are really enjoying Inktober at this point and are enjoying the exploration of ideas and learning about potentially new mediums for them, and it's really fun, but other people are starting to feel like they don't actually have enough time for Inktober, and it's just causing them more stress than it's worth. There's a lot of truth in both of those perspectives, I think, and a lot of people are just kind of saying at this point, you know what, I don't think that this is worth it for me, and I'm just gonna go ahead and tap out here, and it's been fun so far, but I don't think I'm gonna do any more. And I think that's totally legit and totally justified. I myself have been taking it pretty easy actually, so I haven't been doing anything on the weekends, and I've just been sharing videos every few days with you guys here, maybe once or twice a week, and it's been a pretty laid back thing, and I actually haven't had to stress about it too much, which is nice. So I think you just kind of have to weigh the options for yourself and not, I don't know, it's a good idea to feel determined and to want to push through the month for that sense of accomplishment and, seeing something completed, and I think that that's very valuable. But at the same time, you really do have to think about whether or not you're enjoying that process still. And I know that work won't always be fun, but this doesn't have to be work. I mean, Inktober's about growth and it's about improvement and challenging yourself So yeah, there will be some growing pains in there, and not everything will be fun and comfortable. But at the same time, if you're not, I don't know, if you don't have like professional goals in mind, you really do have to think about how much it's worth it to stress yourself out about the stuff, you know? Because it might not be, I don't know, I hope that makes sense. It just doesn't have to be a super high stress thing unless you're really trying to take the month to push yourself. You just gotta weigh it because life is always gonna be a stress as well. So just gotta kind of pick and choose what stressors you're going to have in your life at a particular time and move forward from there. I know this second piece is just about done and I haven't really talked about it yet, but this piece I actually did smaller. It was the first time I'd done a piece that was smaller than my usual 7 by 10, and this one was on a 5 by 7 block of watercolor paper, and I actually used some graphite transfer paper to transfer my sketch onto the watercolor block so that I wouldn't have to take the paper off the block, which is what I usually do for my other pieces. And I'm also really excited about the concept for the third piece that you're seeing here. I really, really liked the sketch, and I actually had several sketches that I was trying to choose from for this particular day. This was Friday, I think the 12th, maybe? Maybe day 12? I don't know. I will have shown you which day it was already. Yeah, I had a couple ideas in mind and decided on this one for this day, and I will be exploring the other ideas that I had sketched out this week. So, but this one was really fun. I actually took another one of those diamine fountain pen inks, and this one was in teal, I believe. And I just kind of wet my paper and then I was laying the ink down. As you can see, as usual, these inks are pretty staining. So some of those areas, as soon as I set the ink down, it stayed exactly as I put it, even though my paper was wet. And when I went back to move it, it was just like, nope, I'm here, I'm staying here, which is fine. It still has a sort of soft look to it that I like. And I actually filled in more black on this one than I had on any of my other pieces. I do really enjoy filling in large areas of black. It's just very satisfying and very fun to do. I felt like the black might be, just too much empty space, and I ended up going in with a white Posca pen and adding some, white dots, white texture, and which I think could have been better executed. It's probably my least favorite part of this piece, but that's okay. It was still fun, and I still enjoyed inking over top of this piece. As I've said already before, inking with a brush has been so much fun for me. I've just been enjoying it way more than I expected that I would, as brushes tend to be potentially the hardest inking method to control. You've got fine liners that are pretty rigid and pretty stiff and will give you pretty much the same line width, so you've got a lot of control there. And with brush pens, you have that flexibility of a brush, but in the pen you are limited in the ink flow, and also you're always going to get the same color of ink whether you have a cartridge or the brush pen itself is just filled with a particular color of ink, so there's not as much flexibility in the color. And with a brush, you just have the most customizability, the highest number of options as far as I know. I mean, even a dip pen, yeah, sure, you can get a flex nib in a dip pen and then you can customize the color you're using and how much ink you have at one time, but at the same time, it's definitely still more rigid than a brush. So this was definitely the inking option that I was most intimidated by, as you have to control not only the line weight, so how much pressure you're putting on the brush, but you also have to maintain the amount of ink that is on your brush at any given time. And I've actually found it a lot of fun to manipulate those factors to create, different effects and different types of pieces, and it's been really, really good. So I hope that Inktober is going well for you guys as well. For me, today is Monday, and these pieces are all from the end of last week, so it's the beginning of a new week, and I'm going to be getting started on this week's pieces. I have a few sketches ready to go that I just need to complete the final sketches and transfer them over, and we'll get started. I'm really excited about a fresh week. One thing I've been doing to kind of help myself I don't know, I usually paint in watercolors, so to help myself from feeling too stuck in ink or feeling like, oh, I just missed my watercolors, is I try to paint with watercolors on the weekends. So I started a new watercolor painting just for fun yesterday, actually, last night, and it kind of helps me to still feel connected to that medium while I'm using more inks this month. And also, I've been using my inks even still pretty similarly to how I use watercolors in a lot of ways. So that's really nice because I'm still, I've still got my water containers out. I'm using my brushes and using wet on wet or wet on dry techniques. So it's still pretty similar as far as the overall feeling of working with them. So yeah, I do miss the feel of watercolors and the way they move and the way they layer, but I've been trying to combat that by still using them on the weekends and, exploring some ideas in that time. Oh, and another way that you can, especially if you're a watercolor artist, I know lots of you guys use watercolors. Another thing I've been doing is when I'm doing like thumbnail sketches for Inktober, if I'm trying to plan out the values or the composition, is I've actually just been using watercolors for my thumbnail sketches. So that's been really fun. I've been seeing some really interesting Inktober value studies that people are doing where they'll use just actually watercolors. They'll use just like a black watercolor, or they'll use Payne's gray or neutral tint, some dark, deep watercolor, and using that for Inktober, which I think is really interesting, especially if you're still applying a lot of inking techniques. And I know that a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's not technically ink. Does it even count?" And for me, Inktober, yes. Inktober is about inking and about using ink and exploring the values that come from limiting your supplies in that way. But just have fun and just don't stress about it, guys. I mean, just if you want to make art, you make art, and if you share it on the internet, then you do, or if you don't, that's fine too. I mean, it doesn't have to be on the internet to count. Anyway, okay. Thank you guys for hanging out with me during this video. I hope you have enjoyed it and have enjoyed my rambly bits as well as usual. And it's the start of a new week. I truly, sincerely hope that you are all doing very, very well and having a wonderful month. And I will see you all next time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye.